Good afternoon. I'm Israeli government spokesman Avi Hyman. Today is day 234 of the October 7th war, and our war aims remain the same. Destroy Hamas, free the 125 hostages, and ensure Gaza does not pose a threat to Israel. We'll begin with an update on IDF casualties. Since the outset of the October 7th massacre, IDF fatalities have unfortunately risen to 636. Staff Sergeant Bezalel Tzvi Kovac was 20 years old from Jerusalem. He died of his wounds after a battle in the northern Gaza Strip. Staff Sergeant Sahar Sudai was 20 years old from Tel Aviv and also fell in battle in northern Gaza. May their memories be a blessing. Our hearts go out to all the families of those soldiers killed in action, as well as those who were murdered, taken hostage, and wounded. Yesterday, Hamas terrorists fired 8 rockets from Rafah towards central Israeli cities. Had the Iron Dome not intercepted them, they could have caused mass casualties. The rockets were fired 800 meters away from IDF troops operating in the area. As the IDF troops approached, Hamas fired from within their civilian population, between a mosque and a school. We struck and destroyed the launcher shortly after the launch. This is Hamas's method of carrying out terrorist activities under the cover of their own civilian population against the civilians of the State of Israel. A double war crime. Last night, the IDF targeted 2 Hamas commanders in Rafah, whose hands were drenched in Israeli blood. Yassin Rabia, the Hamas chief of staff in Judea and Samaria, he transferred funds to terror targets and planned Hamas terror attacks throughout Judea and Samaria. Rabin carried out numerous murderous terror attacks himself, including in the years 2001 and 2002, in which IDF soldiers were killed. Khalid Nagar was a senior official in Hamas's Judea and Samaria wing. He directed shooting attacks and transferred funds intended for Hamas terrorist activities in the Gaza Strip. He himself carried out several deadly terror attacks between the years of 2001 and 2003, including the murder of Shuki Harmelech, the husband of Israeli member of Knesset Limor son Harmelech. Limor was heavily pregnant at the time that Nagar and his group fired at their family car indiscriminately. Shuki, her husband, jumped on top of her and the baby to save them. He was tragically killed. Now, back to the events of last night. According to initial reports, these are initial reports, a fire broke out after the attack, which appears to have taken civilian lives. Civilian casualties are desperately sad, but this is the war Hamas wanted and started. In the north this morning, the Israeli Air Force aircraft struck and eliminated Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon, from where rockets were fired towards northern Israel earlier this morning. In addition, the IAF fighter jet struck Hezbollah military structure also in southern Lebanon. Now an update from Kogat, which coordinates the entry of aid to Gaza. Yesterday, 360 trucks went into Gaza, including 124 aid trucks that arrived to Kerem Shalom from Egypt. 37 pallets airdropped over Gaza. 6 tankers of fuel entered Gaza. Last week, 1,981 trucks entered Gaza. Excluding UNRWA, the UN agency sent in 284 trucks. As Kogat confirms, only 7 were from UNRWA. We're at a loss to understand that everybody else seems to be able to send supplies to Gaza. We ask the simple question, maybe the problem is with UNRWA? That's the end of our briefing for today. I'll ask that you put your questions and your outlet in the chat box, please.
Thank you. 3 questions from Dan Williams at Reuters. What is Israel's explanation for the mass casualty event at Rafah? Did the IDF use 2,000-pound bombs of the kind US warned it might stop supplying? And has Israel briefed the United States on this incident?
Dan, I can say what I just said, which is paraphrasing the words of the IDF. If you want more information, I'd ask you to check with the IDF spokesman's unit. It is still under investigation. The target of that attack, it was was against those two Hamas henchmen. I'd ask you to ask the IDF for any additional information.
Thank you. Further question from Dan Williams. Did Egyptian troops shoot at or exchange fire with the IDF in the Rafah area?
So again, that is, I've seen those reports, but that would come under ongoing operational activity, potentially, and it's definitely a question for the IDF. I have no comment currently.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Given that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, is it reasonable to expect that more civilians may be killed as Israel gets closer to the Hamas leadership in Rafah?
Thanks for the question, Joel. Hamas does its utmost to ensure civilian casualties on both sides. If they're not purposely shooting at Israelis or doing what we saw on October 7th, which is what they wish to do in the future, plowing through our borders, raping, killing entire families alive, then they are fighting from within their own civilian population. Shooting at Israel, at Israeli civilians from deep within their own civilian population is a double war crime. It's what Hamas has become famous for. We will do our utmost to go after Hamas. Our fight is with Hamas, not the people of Gaza. We'll do our utmost to go after Hamas and avoid civilian casualties. To date, we've moved over around a million Gazans out of harm's way from Rafah elsewhere to the north, to north of Rafah, and we will continue to go after Hamas while avoiding civilian casualties.
Thank you. Question from Jim Williams at Zenga International News Service, Washington, D.C. The U.S. State Department reported that CIA Director Burns would be returning to the region this week to try to restart hostage release talks. Are you aware of any formal talks starting up again this week?
So as we've said from day one of this war, we will do our absolute utmost to bring home all of the hostages, every last hostage. Now, for that to be achieved, we will need to keep military pressure up on Hamas, which we are doing in Rafah and elsewhere. We will need to continue to go after Hamas while using all of the diplomatic channels available to us. We've learned from the last major release of hostages, where we got over half of the hostages back, that if we don't keep up the military pressure, Hamas feels that they don't have what to lose, then it's a lot harder on the diplomatic channels. So we will continue to use all diplomatic channels. We will not be negotiating in the media. We will be negotiating behind closed doors, and we hope to see all of the hostages released to their families very soon. I'll reiterate our message to Hamas, which is that this war could end today if they unconditionally surrendered to Israel and released all of the hostages.
Thank you. Question from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. War Cabinet Minister Gadi Eisenkot said today that Hamas is regaining strength and that the fighting will continue for years. Is that the assessment of the government and the Prime Minister's office?
I think the Prime Minister on multiple occasions has made it clear that we have to go after the Hamas battalions, the last 4 of which are in Rafah. We need to smash those battalions so that they are no longer able to be active as a military, as a terror army. We will continue to do that. After which, we'll have to do what the Prime Minister has described as mopping up, meaning going back and taking care of small pockets of Hamas terrorists. I'm not going to comment directly to those reports from Minister Eisenkot. You can obviously ask him what he meant by that. It's unclear to me.
Thank you. Question from Fred Ager from Interplanetary Television. Israel's chief military advocate Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi condemns a very grave IDF strike on Rafah, claiming it killed dozens of civilians and is conducting an investigation to the fullest extent. In open inverted commas, the IDF regrets any harm to non-combatants during the war. End quote. Do you have any updates on the investigation of this strike?
So I think we've already spoken about this. We went after two Hamas commanders responsible for many attacks in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, but predominantly Judea and Samaria. Shooting attacks like the one that I spoke about, but sadly, in recent weeks, in recent years, we've seen many of these shooting attacks across Judea and Samaria. They were drenched in Israeli blood, these two individuals. According to initial reports, a fire broke out after the attack. These terrorists were hiding underground, and it would appear that there were civilian casualties. We're looking into this. I will say that it was definitely grave. Any loss of life, civilian life, is grave and is awful. We seek to go after Hamas and limit civilian casualties, and we will investigate if an investigation is needed. This is an unfolding story.
Thank you. That was the last question.
Thank you very much. We'll be back tomorrow at 3:30. Thank you.